All right, so our lesson today is on Sherman's March during the Civil War. We just finished watching a short video describing Sherman's March. I'm here with my two kids, Cameron, who is in seventh grade, and Dean, who is in sixth grade, and they actually have both been doing a little bit of study of the Civil War this year in their own schools. So we are going to go ahead and talk about Sherman's March. So after we watched that video, what were your guys' initial impressions about Sherman's March?
At first, it seemed kind of a bit like mean that they were kind of like all marching in there and destroying everything.
Yeah.
And kind of invading people's personal space. But it also given people like kind of a look on how the war really was.
Yeah, I think that's really a great point. Why do you think they were doing those mean things, though?
So,
Cameron.
they were trying to like show that they weren't the only ones in the war, I guess. I don't really know.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Dean, what were your initial thoughts about Sherman's March?
Kind of what Cameron said, and I think the reason why they did those things, so they it mentioned in the video, so then they could kind of like either like intimidate or like make the other armies have like harder lives.
Yeah.
On their side, and also to get the stuff so then they could have easier lives or even get food.
Yeah.
And stuff for the wars.
Those are some good thoughts. So as Sherman is in Atlanta and he's getting ready to march to Savannah, and he's planning to destroy and gather supplies for his own men and stuff like that. Do you guys know what his purpose was behind that? You touched a little bit on that, Dane. So it said it just really briefly in the video. It said that they wanted to take away the people's will to fight, to continue fighting. They kind of wanted to break them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as they go ahead.
Kind of intimidate them, so they're kind of not as confident as they were in the war.
Yeah, and as they what was one of the main things that they did as they went? They were breaking what?
They were breaking the houses and burning things that they couldn't use.
What was Sherman's neckties?
He would usually go and take all their food and all their things, and if they couldn't use it, they would burn it or get rid of it.
Yeah, that's true, but that's not what Sherman's neckties were. You guys don't remember them talking about that in the video?
I don't think so.
So when they went and they broke down the railroads and they took the ties, the tracks that the railroads go on, they heated them up and bent them around trees so that they couldn't use the railroads. That stopped supplies from getting in. That stopped supplies getting to the Confederate Army and stuff like that. So they kind of cut off the South from everything else.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big move for the Confederate or the Union Army to do to the Confederates. So with all of that in mind, what we just learned, we are going to read a portion of a letter that General Sherman wrote to General U.S. Grant. And so we are going to read a section of that. And as we read through that, you guys have both got your highlighters, and you're going to highlight main points, information that supports those main points, or anything that you guys think is important. So we're just going to read a section of that. Let's start on the first page, the bottom paragraph that starts at the time, okay? So we're going to read that whole paragraph that continues on to the next page, okay? Do you want me to read it out loud, or would you guys like to take turns?
Well, you can read it.
I'll read it and you guys follow along.
Yep.
Okay. At the time, we carried Fort McAllister by assault so handsomely with its 22 guns and entire garrison. I was hardly aware of its importance, but since passing down the river with General Foster and up with Admiral Dahlgren, I realized how admirably adapted are Ossabaw Sound and Ogeechee River to supply an army operating against Savannah. Seagoing vessels can easily come to Kingsbridge, a point on the Ogeechee River, 14 and a half miles due west of Savannah, from which point we have roads leading to all our camps. The country is low and sandy and cut up with marshes, which in wet weather will be very bad, but we have been so favored with weather that they are all now comparatively good, and heavy details are constantly employed in double corduroying the marshes, so that I have no fears even of bad weather. Fortunately, also, by liberal and judicious foraging, we reached the sea coast abundantly supplied with forage and provisions, needing nothing on arrival except bread. Of this we started from Atlanta, from 8 to 20 days supply per crops, and some of the troops only had 1 day's issue of bread during the trip of 30 days. Yet they did not want, for sweet potatoes were very abundant, as well as cornmeal, and our soldiers took to them naturally. We started with about 5,000 heads of cattle, and arrived with over 10,000, of course, consuming mostly turkeys, chickens, sheep, hogs, and the cattle of the country. As to our mules and horses, we left Atlanta with about 2,500 wagons, many of which were drawn by mules which had not recovered from the Chattanooga starvation, all of which were replaced, the poor mules shot, and our transportation is now in superb condition. I have no doubt the state of Georgia was lost, but our operations, 15,000 first-rate mules. As to horses, Kilpatrick collected all his remounts, and it looks to me in riding along our columns as though every officer had 3 or 4 led horses, and each regiment seems to be followed by at least 50 Negroes and footsore soldiers riding on horses and mules. The custom was for each brigade to send out daily a foraging party of about 50 men, on foot, who invariably returned mounted with several wagons loaded with poultry, potatoes, etc. And as the army is composed of about 40 brigades, you can estimate approximately the number of horses collected. Great numbers of these were shot by my order because of the disorganizing effect on our infantry of having too many idlers mounted. General Houston is now engaged in collecting statistics on this subject, but I know the government will never receive full accounts of our captures, although the results aimed at was fully attained, vis-a-vis to deprive our enemy of them. All of these animals I will have sent to Port Royal or collected behind Fort McAllister to be used by General Saxton in his farming operations, or by the quartermaster's department after they are systematically accounted for. While General Easton is collecting transportation for my troops to James River, I will throw to Port Royal Island all our means of transportation I can, and collect the rest near Fort McAllister, covered by Ogeechee River, and entrenchments to be erected. All right, I think we're going to stop there. So I forgot to mention this letter is from General Sherman. What type of source does this count as? Have you guys talked about sources in your classes before?
Like twice.
Like a primary source or a secondary source?
Yes, I've heard
Yeah,
about that.
those.
So what source is this?
I'm pretty sure since it was a letter from him at the time, it is a primary source.
Correct. Nice job, Dean. So it's a primary source. It's straight from the person who it affected, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
At the time.
So based on what we just read, I've got some questions here. Actually, I will pass these questions over to you. You guys can look at that together. All right, so we are going to look at question number, in that second section there,
Mm-hmm.
question number 6. It says, how did Sherman describe how he provisioned his men? Describe the type of food his men had. Why did the army have more food at this point in the march compared to when it began? So what can you guys answer for me on that question?
They said they had some sweet potatoes, and they also said in the page 2 they had lots of cattle and turkeys, chickens, sheep, and hogs.
Mm-hmm.
So they probably had tons of food options.
They did have a lot. It did say in there something that they didn't really have. Do you remember, Dane, what they didn't have? I think it's on that first page.
Where is it?
Oh, I see it.
Can you show Dane?
Oh, not a lot of bread.
They didn't have a lot of bread. So as they were marching along the trail, I'm sure they didn't really have the opportunity to sit and bake bread.
Mm-hmm.
But they had a lot of other stuff, right?
Yeah, like sweet potatoes.
So
And other things.
it asks in here the second part of this question, why did the army guys, why did the army have more food at this point in the march compared to when it began?
Because they could have either grown some or repopulated. Like it said, there was 5,000 cattle.
Yeah.
They probably had more food because they took it from everyone else.
Yeah. As they went along, they did what? They sent out what kind of parties?
Foraging.
Yeah,
Foraging parties,
Yeah,
right?
foraging.
Foraging. We talked a little bit before about what foraging means, right? So these foraging parties that went out, what did they do?
They would go out and pretty much take everyone's supplies, and anything they didn't have use to, they would either burn it or get rid of it.
It's true. They went and they gathered and stuff so that they could support this massive army that they had that was marching. Yeah, Dane.
So one thought, it said in the video that they were told not to go into people's homes, but nobody really listened to that, and nobody really did anything about it.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
I think it's kind of like annoying because like they were told not to, and like they even did do it, so like it, and they didn't even do anything, which basically encourages that because like, oh, nothing's gonna happen if we don't,
Yeah.
and it only benefits us. So
Right. What do you think the lasting effects of that were? After this march was over, after the war was over, do you think there were lasting effects from that?
I feel like some of the economy was messed up because of that, and like either I'm sure there's some kind of like, because that's home invasion and stuff, so it's
Right. So
Just-
how do you think those people felt about that?
it's just incredibly rude. Like, what if you're just having breakfast and then out of nowhere, the team of foragers just come into your house and start taking your things?
Yeah. I think that would probably have some pretty lasting effects
Like,
about their feelings about the people from the north. Huh?
yeah,
Do you think that would make it hard to rebuild?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, their relationships would definitely be messed up, and
Yeah.
it would be hard to accept them back because they broke into our houses, and
It would be really difficult, I think.
Yeah.
I think you're right there. Well, we are going to stop our lesson right there. But I think there's a lot of stuff to learn from Sherman's March, huh?
Mhm.
All right, thanks, guys.